It was supposed to be just another quiet day in Savannah, Georgia, another patrol, another face, another easy stop. But when two officers decided to flex their authority on a man they thought they could humiliate, they set off a chain of events no one saw coming. They didn't just pick the wrong guy. They picked the one man who had the strength, the experience, and the patience to dismantle their entire system from the inside. Officer Paige Monroe had been patrolling the historic district for months. She was used to the quiet rhythms of the place, the slow churn of ceiling fans behind old windows, the distant bells from churches, the smell of Spanish moss baking under the sun. But lately, the whispers had started. Break-ins, suspicious activity, people who didn't belong. Driving along Jones Street, Paige saw a tall black man walking alone. No shopping bags, no stroller, no dog. Just walking. That alone was enough to raise a flag in her mind. He wore a charcoal hoodie, worn jeans, and sneakers. Her gut tightened. Her training told her to engage. Her prejudice, though she'd never admit it, screamed even louder. She pulled the cruiser to the curb. Tires crunched against gravel. Her hand hovered near her taser as she stepped out. "Excuse me, sir," she called. "Can I talk to you for a second?" The man stopped. Didn't flinch. Didn't run. His posture was relaxed, hands visible. "Of course, officer." "Is there a problem?" he asked politely. That calmness rubbed her the wrong way. Like he wasn't afraid. Like he knew how this would go. "What brings you around here?" "Just taking a walk," he replied casually, gesturing toward the rows of historic homes and manicured lawns. "In this neighborhood?" she asked, the edge in her voice cutting through the humid air. "Yes," he replied. "I live nearby." Paige didn't believe him. She didn't want to. She asked for ID. He hesitated not long, but just enough for her to mark it as suspicious. "Is there a reason you're asking?" he said, his tone still respectful, but cooler now. "We've had reports of suspicious individuals," she said flatly. "You fit the description." "What description is that?" he asked. She didn't answer. She couldn't. She didn't have one. "Officer," he said evenly, "I'm not who you think I am." "Then prove it," she snapped. He took a slow step forward, calm but deliberate. "I'm Marcus Eldridge. Captain. Internal Affairs. I'm here on assignment." "Call your precinct." For a split second, her confidence wavered, but her pride burned hotter. "Undercover," she scoffed. "Dressed like that? You're making a mistake." The neighbors had started to watch now, pretending to sweep porches, hiding behind curtains. Paige could feel the weight of their stares. She lifted her radio. "Officer Monroe. I've got a suspect matching the description. Requesting backup." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "You're about to make the worst decision of your career." Two cruisers arrived minutes later. Officers jumped out. "Young. Wary. I got a suspect," Paige barked. "Claims he's one of us." Marcus turned to them. "Captain Marcus Eldridge. Internal Affairs. Badge number 4025. Verify it now." One of the officers' Thomas froze. He recognized the name. Paige didn't let him speak. "Detain him," she ordered. The cuffs clicked around Marcus's wrists. He didn't resist. He didn't protest. He just looked at Paige with calm resignation. "You don't know what you've done," he said as they loaded him into the cruiser. The ride back to the station was painfully silent. Paige stole glances in the mirror. Marcus sat with an eerie calm, his hands resting in his lap, posture unshaken. Thomas kept glancing back too, unease written all over his face. When they reached the station, Paige walked him inside. The booking officer looked up and paused. Something about Marcus made him hesitate. "Name?" he asked. "Marcus Eldridge." The pen stopped midair. "You sure about this one, Monroe?" the officer muttered. "Yeah," she snapped. Marcus was led to holding. Before stepping inside the cell, he turned to Thomas. "You still have a chance to do the right thing." Thomas said nothing. Back at the desk, the phone rang. The officer picked it up and went pale. "Monroe," he said. "You need to stay right here." "Why?" He handed her the phone. "This is Chief Langston," the voice boomed. "Do not speak to your suspect. Do not touch him. I'm on my way." The line went dead. Minutes later, Chief Langston stormed through the front doors. The whole precinct tensed. "Where's he?" he demanded. Paige stammered. "Holding. Room 3. Langston didn't stop. He stormed past the desk, straight to the cell. Inside, Marcus looked up. Calm. Knowing. I'm so sorry. Langston choked as he unlocked the door and removed the cuffs. You just handed me every ounce of proof I need, Marcus said coldly. To burn this place down. Back in the lobby, whispers turned to gasps. Phones buzzed. The truth spread like wildfire. Outside, the chaos had already begun. Protesters. Reporters. Cameras. Marcus stepped out and addressed them all. My name is Marcus Eldridge. I am Director of Internal Affairs for Savannah Police. And today I was detained, cuffed, and humiliated without cause, without verification, and without justice. He laid out the facts. The cameras didn't blink. Neither did he. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a symptom of systemic rot. And then the lawsuits came. The city exploded. Paige Monroe was suspended, then fired. Her face became a symbol of everything wrong. Her name trended online for all the wrong reasons. She tried to tell herself she was following protocol. But deep down, she knew. She hadn't asked the right questions. She'd made assumptions. She saw a black man walking in a white neighborhood and thought, threat. She lost her badge. But worse, she lost who she thought she was. Meanwhile, Marcus was just getting started. He met with civil rights attorneys, with journalists, with the DOJ. He opened old cases, unsealed hidden complaints. He called out every officer who had ever buried evidence or ignored protocol. Reform wasn't enough. He demanded overhaul. He helped launch a civilian oversight board, new training programs, policy changes, transparency protocols. Savannah tried to resist. But the people were louder now. Teachers brought reform into classrooms. Churches offered legal aid. Even some officers stood up, finally understanding they didn't sign up to defend corruption. Paige watched from the sidelines, living in a motel, ignored by old friends, disowned by her own family. She couldn't look away. She saw the change. She knew she had been on the wrong side of history not just once, but again and again, in small silent moments that now screamed in her memory. One day, Marcus stood at the cemetery near the edge of town where moss hung low over the stones. He knelt at his father's grave and left something behind. A badge. Not the one that failed his father. A new one. Engraved with a single word, accountability. I kept my promise, Marcus whispered. And I'm not done yet. Savannah still had a long road ahead. But for the first time, it wasn't sleepwalking through the past. It was waking up brick by brick. And Marcus Eldridge wasn't going anywhere until the foundation had been rebuilt, not just to survive, but to be worthy of those who had been silenced for far too long. The weeks that followed were anything but quiet. The energy in Savannah was changing, not with riots or explosions, but with determination. With resolve. It showed in the way people walked down the streets, in the way local businesses began hosting town halls, in how the city government, long comfortable in its routines, now scrambled to respond. At the newly formed Civilian Oversight Board's first meeting, Marcus sat at the center of the long table, surrounded by lawyers, educators, pastors, and community organizers. They weren't interested in bureaucracy or public relations. They wanted substance, justice, prevention. They wanted policies that couldn't be twisted or ignored. Marcus didn't come in to play politics. He came in with spreadsheets, data, names. He'd already compiled over 70 unresolved complaints, cases of racial profiling, excessive force, misconduct swept under the rug. And now, for the first time in the city's history, someone had the power and the will to deal with them. He listened carefully as people stood up and told their stories. A mother who'd watched her teenage son get handcuffed at gunpoint outside their own house. A middle school teacher pulled over 5 times in a single month. A retired Army captain forced out of his vehicle and slammed onto the hood just because he matched the description. Each one was another brick in the wall that had long separated the police from the people they were supposed to serve. And each one was now being pried loose. Meanwhile, Valerie Grant, the new chief, was walking into the toughest job of her life. A black woman in uniform standing at the head of a department she knew was still divided. She wasn't naive. She knew there were officers who didn't trust her, didn't respect her. But she wasn't there to win a popularity contest. She was there to rebuild a house that had been burning for years. She worked side by side with Marcus, not always agreeing but always aligning in purpose. Together, they implemented sweeping reforms. Body cams that actually stayed on. An internal review board made up of civilians, not just fellow cops. Officers now required psychological evaluations annually. Mandatory rotation out of high-intensity zones to prevent burnout and abuse of power. There were those who resisted loudly. Protests erupted, this time from police unions claiming the new policies handcuffed officers. A few high-ranking officers resigned in protest, muttering about the good old days. But the days of looking the other way were over. Savannah was watching now. And not just Savannah. Marcus' story had gone national. Interviews with major networks. Features in investigative documentaries. Requests for speaking engagements in D.C., Los Angeles, Chicago. But Marcus stayed home. He wasn't chasing fame, he was building something real. Something his father never got to see. Something his mother, still alive and quiet as ever, now watched from her porch with tears in her eyes. One chilly evening, as the city prepared for its annual Founders' Day parade, Marcus received an invitation he didn't expect. A local high school had invited him to be their keynote speaker. He almost declined. But then he thought of the next generation, the ones who had marched, who had organized sit-ins, who had stood outside precinct walls holding signs with his name. They didn't need another politician. They needed to see what resilience looked like. They needed to see what justice in motion meant. He stood on the stage in the school's auditorium. The lights low, the seats full. Students sat shoulder to shoulder, many of them black and brown, many of them with their phones in hand, already live streaming. "My name is Marcus Eldridge," he began, "and I want to talk to you about power." He told them about the day he was cuffed. Not to relive the humiliation, but to show them what happens when people forget that every badge, every uniform is supposed to serve, not rule. Power isn't about control, he said. It's about responsibility. And when it gets twisted, when it gets used to silence people instead of protect them, it's our job to push back. He looked out into the sea of young faces. You don't need permission to speak up. You don't need a title to demand better. And you definitely don't need to wait until you're older to make change. The moment you feel something's wrong, that's the moment you act. The room erupted into applause, not out of obligation, but out of recognition. These were kids who had grown up watching the world crumble. Now, they were seeing what it looked like to build again. In the back row of the auditorium, someone else was listening to Paige Monroe. She had come quietly, without notice, wearing plain clothes. She didn't sit up front, didn't talk to anyone. She just listened. Every word cut through her. And yet, for the first time, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like truth. When Marcus stepped off the stage, the students rushed him, forming a crowd around him. Paige stayed in the shadows, watching. She didn't speak to him that day. She wasn't ready. But that night, she sat on the edge of her motel bed, pulled out a spiral notebook, and began to write. Not a defense. Not a letter to the city. Just the truth. Her truth. The next morning, she mailed it anonymously to the Civilian Oversight Board. She didn't know what would come of it. She didn't expect forgiveness. But she wanted her words on record. She wanted the story told, not to clear her name, but to admit what she had refused to see for too long. Months passed. Savannah continued to evolve. Police precincts held open house events, inviting families inside. Officers walked their beats with community advocates, not alone. Public murals bloomed across buildings, artwork celebrating the names of those who had once been silenced. And on a warm spring morning, a ribbon-cutting ceremony took place in a lot that used to be a vacant, trash-strewn stretch of concrete. It was now the Marcus Eldridge Justice Center. Not because he asked for it. Not because he needed the recognition. But because the city needed to remember. They needed a place where justice didn't feel abstract. Where accountability had an address. Where future generations could learn not just what went wrong, but how to make it right. Marcus stood under the canopy that morning, surrounded by city officials, local clergy, and a choir of children singing the national anthem. As he cut the ribbon, he glanced to the back of the crowd, and there she was. Paige Monroe, standing silently. No cameras, no media, just her. And when their eyes met, Marcus gave a small nod. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but acknowledgement. She returned the nod, eyes glistening. She wasn't a hero. She never would be. But maybe, just maybe, she could still be part of something better. Savannah wasn't perfect. It probably never would be. But now it had memory. It had accountability. It had people willing to fight for change every single day. And most of all, it had hope. Real, grounded, messy hope. The kind that doesn't fade when the headlines do. The kind you carry in your chest like a vow. The kind that says, never again.